The morning Elaine Bridges closed her fourth consecutive deal in a single week, she did what she always did. She ordered a double espresso, crossed one leg over the other at her glass desk on the 28th floor, and looked out at Seoul like it owed her something. It didn't, actually. She'd earned every square inch of this view. The city sprawled below her in the way only Seoul could. Loud and glittering and relentlessly alive. A skyline that never quite decided between tradition and ambition, and so had simply chosen both. Elaine understood that energy. She'd been running on it for 3 years. Her phone buzzed. California calling. She smiled before she even picked up. My daughter. Her mother's voice came through warm and full, the way Sunday mornings used to sound back home. How's my baby? Mama. I just closed the Haedong account. A pause. Then her mother screamed. The kind of scream that probably rattled every window in their Palo Alto estate. James. James, come here. Your daughter just... Her father's voice cut in, deep and laughing. What did she do now? Haedong, Elaine said. Haedong. Her father went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Baby girl, that account has been closed to foreign firms for 11 years. 12. Elaine corrected, grinning. They made an exception. Her parents prayed over her right there. Her mother crying softly. Her father's baritone steady and sure. Their voices stitching together across 12 time zones the way they always had. It was the one ritual Elaine refused to skip regardless of how packed her calendar was. Regardless of what meeting was waiting. Regardless of how many assistants were hovering outside her office door with tablets and mild panic in their eyes. When the call ended, she sat for a moment in the quiet. Then she put her espresso down, smoothed her ivory wide-leg trousers, and stood up. Send them in, she said to no one in particular. Her assistant Yuna opened the door immediately, which confirmed she'd been listening. The park group team is in Conference B. And Yuna hesitated, which was unusual for her. There's someone in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment. Then he doesn't get one. He said to tell you his name is Kwon Sungo. Elaine didn't move. She kept her face perfectly neutral because she'd learned in this city that neutrality was its own kind of power. Tell him I'm unavailable. Yuna nodded. She started to leave. And Yuna? Elaine picked up her blazer from the chair, cream cashmere, perfectly cut, the kind of thing that made people in rooms stop talking just to look. Tell him I said it with warmth. Seoul had not been kind to Elaine in the beginning. She wanted to be honest about that when people asked, which they frequently did, usually at dinners or on panels where the lights were flattering and the questions weren't. She'd arrived at 26 with a business degree from Stanford, a decade's worth of competitive fire, and a plan so detailed it had subplans. Her parents had offered to fund everything. She'd taken a fraction of it. Enough to lease office space in Gangnam and cover 6 months of operating costs, and handed the rest back. I need to build it myself, she'd told her father. He'd looked at her for a long moment. You know I built mine myself too. I know. That's why I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to watch. He'd laughed. That was the thing about James Bridges. He knew a version of himself when he saw one. 3 years later, Bridges Soul Ventures was not the scrappy startup she'd launched from a shared co-working space on the 4th floor of a building that smelled permanently of ramen. It was a firm, a real one. 17 employees, a client list that read like a who's who of Korean industry, and a reputation that had quietly, methodically, been constructed deal by deal, handshake by handshake, room by room. Elaine had done it by being exactly what no one in this city had expected her to be. Brilliant, warm, relentless, and absolutely unbothered by the rooms that initially hadn't wanted to open for her. She walked into those rooms anyway. She'd learned early that in Seoul, trust was earned through consistency. So she showed up early. She learned Korean, not tourist Korean, real Korean, business Korean, the kind that made older executives do a double take mid-sentence. She dressed like a woman who had already won. She laughed genuinely and often and without apology. And the laughter disarmed people who'd come into meetings already defensive. Word spread the way word does in tight circles. Have you met the American woman? The one with the Gangnam office? She's something else. She was. The gala for the Korean Business Innovation Forum came every year. But this particular edition had an edge to it. New money was in the room. Old money was nervous. The venue, a converted heritage building in Jongno that some architect had convinced a committee to let them reimagine, was the kind of beautiful that felt like a statement. Ikaine arrived in cobalt blue. The dress was architectural, structured across the shoulders, falling clean and dramatic to the floor, with a neckline that said confidence without trying. Her jewelry was minimal. One thing she'd learned: when you walk into a room like a fact, you don't need to announce yourself with accessories. The room adjusts to you. She collected a glass of sparkling water. She didn't drink at networking events, another deliberate choice, and began making her rounds. This was where she shone. Not behind a desk, though she was lethal behind a desk. In the room, moving through it with that particular ease that made people feel, somehow, that she'd been waiting specifically to speak to them. It was a gift, and she'd polished it into a weapon. By the time the formal reception began, she'd already confirmed 2 potential partnerships, connected a client of hers with a manufacturer they'd been trying to reach for months, and been photographed by 3 separate people who she was fairly certain ran business blogs. It was during the cocktail portion, just as the string quartet shifted into something more contemporary, that she heard the voice. Low, easy. The kind of voice that was accustomed to rooms going quiet when it spoke. "You're Ikaine Bridges." She turned. He was. She would admit this later, privately, to herself and no one else. Extraordinarily handsome. The kind of handsome that had probably made his life significantly easier in ways he'd never fully had to reckon with. Tall, sharp-jawed, dressed in a black suit that fit him the way suits in magazine spreads fit the models who looked vaguely inconvenienced to be wearing them. Expensive watch. No ring. "I am," she said, because she never performed false modesty and wasn't about to start. "Quan Sungo." He extended his hand. She looked at it for exactly 1 beat. Then she shook it. "You came to my office today without an appointment. You were unavailable." With warmth, she reminded him. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the shadow of one. Like the real smile was deciding whether to show up. "I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 2 months. I know. You kept declining." "I did." "Why?" Ikaine tilted her head slightly. "Because you kept sending other people to ask. If something's worth having, you show up yourself." She lifted her glass. "You're here now. That's more interesting." He looked at her like he was recalibrating something. She held his gaze without effort. "Have dinner with me," he said. "I have a 7 a.m. meeting tomorrow." "I didn't say tonight." She smiled, the real one, the one that had disarmed better men than him in better rooms than this. "Mr. Quan, send your proposal to my office. Officially, this time. If it's interesting, I'll read it." She excused herself. She spent the rest of the evening being fully present to everyone else in the room, laughing loud when something was funny, listening with her whole attention when something was worth listening to. She did not look back in his direction, but she was aware of him the way you're aware of weather. The particular stillness before something changes. He sent the proposal the next morning at 6:47 a.m. Ikaine read it over her espresso. Then she read it again. It was good. She didn't want it to be, but it was genuinely, specifically good. Not the kind of proposal her team could have polished into good, but good in the bones. He understood the market she was moving into before she told anyone she was moving into it. The numbers were clean. The projections were aggressive but defensible. She sat with it for a full 10 minutes, which for Ikaine was practically meditation. Then she typed 3 words to Yuna. "Schedule the meeting." The meeting ran 40 minutes over. Not because she was charmed, but that was irrelevant. It ran over because Quan Sungo was, underneath the expensive tailoring and the boardroom confidence, actually sharp. He argued with her twice and wasn't wrong either time, which she found more attractive than she planned to. He had opinions about the gaps in mid-market Korean tech infrastructure that matched her own private analysis so closely she'd have accused him of reading her files if she didn't keep those files on an encrypted drive that had never touched a network. "You've thought about this the same way I have," she said at one point. "I've been thinking about it for 3 years, he said. "You've been building it for 3 years. That's different." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He paused. "The compliment is that you're the only person in Seoul who could actually execute it." She looked at him. "I mean that professionally," he added. And then, "and otherwise." She should have flagged that. Looking back, and she would look back many times, with the particular clarity that only hindsight and a growing belly can provide. She should have. pulled the conversation back to the spreadsheets and kept it there. Instead she laughed. And that, as they say, was that. For a woman who calculated risk for a living, Ikane fell into Kwon Sungo with a recklessness that would have appalled her professionally. She didn't think of it that way in the beginning. In the beginning it simply felt like an extension of the energy she already lived in. Fast, exhilarating, the particular high of something that keeps exceeding your expectations. He texted at strange hours and the texts were funny. He took her to dinner at places that weren't on any list because he didn't operate by lists. He argued with her in a way that felt like sparring rather than combat, like he wasn't trying to win so much as he wanted to see how far she'd go. She went far. She always went far. Her parents liked him. That was the part she'd reflect on most after. They'd spoken to him once over video, briefly, during a call where he'd happened to be sitting beside her. And her mother had said afterward, "He looks at you like you're interesting, baby. Not just pretty. Interesting." Her mother said this like it was the highest compliment a man could offer a woman. Ikane had agreed then. She'd agreed completely. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't know for months, was how much of that attention had been deliberate. Calibrated. A performance so refined it barely registered as one. But that came later. In those early months it was just sweet. Genuinely, unironically sweet in a way that Ikane, who prided herself on having seen most things, hadn't fully expected to feel. She told Yuna first, which wasn't planned. It was a Tuesday. Ikane had walked out of the private clinic in Seocho with a small white paper bag and an expression she couldn't quite organize, and Yuna, who was waiting outside with Ikane's afternoon schedule and an umbrella because it had been threatening rain since morning, had taken one look at her employer's face and said quietly, "Do you need me to clear your afternoon?" Ikane had stood on the pavement for a moment. The city moved around her. At its usual velocity, delivery bikes and school uniforms and a woman arguing into her phone and the smell of street food drifting from somewhere nearby. "Yes," Ikane said. "Clear it." In the car, she opened her phone and called California. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Baby, you okay? It's not your usual time." "Mama." Ikane took a breath. "I need to tell you something." She told her everything. All of it. Sungo, the months of it, the deal they'd been building together, the pregnancy. She talked for 11 minutes without stopping, something she almost never did, and when she finished the line was quiet for a moment. Then her mother said, "Are you healthy?" "Yes." "Is the baby healthy?" "As far as they can tell." "Yes." "Okay." Her mother's voice was steady and warm and unshakable in the way Ikane had been drawing on her whole life. "Then everything else is details. We handle details, baby. That's what we do." Her father got on the line. He didn't say much. He said, "You are a Bridges. Whatever that man does or doesn't do, you are a Bridges. You hear me?" "Yes, Daddy." "Good. Now put some food in your body and call us tonight." She laughed, the tight thing in her chest loosening just slightly. "Okay. We love you. I love you too." She hung up and looked out the window at Seoul going past and thought, Okay then. She told Sungo that evening. She'd planned it deliberately. His apartment, not hers, so she could leave when she wanted. She dressed well because she always dressed well, but specifically because she'd learned over years that looking composed made her feel composed, and she wanted all the composure she could assemble for this. He'd opened a bottle of wine she didn't drink anymore. She watched him pour and thought about how to begin. "I'm pregnant," she said. He turned. The wine glass was in his hand. His face did something complicated and fast that she cataloged but didn't interpret, not yet, because she was still in the data-gathering phase of the conversation. "That's," he started. "Yours," she confirmed. "Obviously." A longer pause. "How far?" 8 weeks. He set the glass down. He crossed the room and sat across from her and was quiet for a moment, and then he said the thing she needed to hear. That this was unexpected but not unwelcome. That he wasn't going anywhere. That they would figure it out together. He said them with the steady warmth she'd associated with him since that first meeting. His hand covered hers. She believed him. That was her only mistake. The shift wasn't dramatic. That was the thing about Kwon Sungo. He didn't do dramatic. He did gradual. He did the slow, almost imperceptible pivot that a woman who wasn't paying close attention might miss entirely. Ikane was always paying close attention. The first sign was the Park Wonjin deal. Sungo had introduced her to Park Wonjin 3 months prior. A tech infrastructure play she'd spent weeks developing into something workable, the night before the final meeting. A meeting Akane had orchestrated from concept to closing. Sungo mentioned casually, almost as an aside, that he'd spoken to Won Jin that afternoon. He's wondering, Sungo said, scrolling through his phone, if it might make more sense for the contract to sit under my firm, given the relationship. Akane had looked at him. The relationship I built. The relationship we built. He smiled easily. Together, she'd let that moment sit. She'd filed it carefully in the part of her mind that didn't panic and didn't perform. It just watched and recorded and waited. The next sign came 2 weeks later. A business contact told her, secondhand and uncomfortably, that Sungo had characterized their partnership in a way that positioned him as the primary architect of her last 2 deals. She'd been described, apparently, as connected to Kwon Sungo's network. Connected to. Akane had thanked her contact. Thanked them warmly, finished her coffee, and sat very still. For about 4 minutes. Then she'd opened her laptop and started making moves she hadn't planned to make for another year. She moved quietly. She always moved quietly when it mattered most. She didn't confront him. That wasn't her style, and also, she realized with a clarity that arrived quietly and stayed, she didn't need to. Confrontation would have told him what she knew. What she knew was more useful kept private. Instead, she restructured. She pulled 3 deals back to sit exclusively under her firm. She had legal review every partnership document they'd signed together. She had dinner with 2 of her longest-standing Korean business contacts, older men who'd respected her from the beginning, and she planted seeds in both conversations with the kind of precision that looked like casual conversation to everyone in the room except Akane. Her baby bump was beginning to show. She bought new suits tailored exactly to her current shape and wore them like armor. The blogs started in the 4th month. The first one was small, a whisper account that trafficked in Seoul business gossip. Sources say Bridges Seoul Ventures has been struggling to close without Kwon Sungo's backing. Industry insiders question whether the American firm can sustain without Korean partnership infrastructure. Akane read it over her morning espresso. Then she posted on her business Instagram. A photo of her at her desk, baby bump visible, contracts visible, the Seoul skyline bright behind her. The caption said, closed 3 deals this week. Working on the 4th. Stay hydrated. It got 40,000 likes by evening. The blogs escalated. She responded to every single one, not with anger, never with anger, but with receipts, numbers, announcements of new deals that landed with the precision of scheduled artillery. Each press release was better than the last. Each photo she released was more stunning than the one before it. She was glowing in the way that some women do when the world underestimates them. A particular, radiant defiance that photographs beautifully. Her mother called one night laughing, "Baby, the internet is obsessed with you." "Good," Akane said. "Let them watch." The thing about Akane Bridges, the thing people who tried to come for her consistently underestimated, was that she had been trained by people who built empires. Her father had faced rooms that didn't want him. Her mother had navigated industries that pretended she wasn't in them. They had raised their daughter not with warnings about how hard the world would be, but with the quiet, foundational certainty that she was built for it anyway, that she didn't need the world to be fair. She just needed to be ready. She was ready. By the time she was 6 months pregnant, Bridges Seoul Ventures had closed 8 figures in new business in a single quarter. The number was not an accident. It was a message, delivered in the language that Seoul's business community understood better than any other. She hired 3 new analysts. She relocated to a larger office, same building, 2 floors higher, and had it designed by an architect whose waitlist was 18 months long and who had made an exception for Akane because she'd met him at a dinner 2 years ago and they'd spent 40 minutes talking about spatial philosophy, which was apparently not something he got to do at dinners very often. The new office had a view that made people go quiet when they walked in. Akane had specifically asked for that. Sungo published the second round of stories himself. She knew it was him. Not because she had proof she could use, not yet, but because the details were too specific to be anything other than sourced from inside. Things only he knew. The timeline of her pregnancy, framed in the coverage as a distraction. A quote from an unnamed executive who described her as emotionally compromised. A suggestion that her recent deals had been closed not on her merit but on the sympathy of partners who felt sorry for a single pregnant woman navigating the market alone. She read all of it. She read it calmly, the way a surgeon reviews a chart. Then she called her PR contact in Seoul, a woman named Bora, who was small and soft-spoken and absolutely ruthless. And she said, "I'm ready." Bora asked, "How big do you want this?" Akane looked out at Seoul from her 2 floors higher office. "Make it the kind of thing they remember in 5 years." The response piece ran in 3 publications simultaneously. It wasn't a rebuttal. Akane was too smart for rebuttals, which always looked defensive and kept the subject in the center of the frame. Instead, it was a profile, the kind of long-form, beautifully written, heavily photographed profile that magazines run when they've identified a subject worth a cover. The photographs were extraordinary. Akane in her office, 6 months pregnant, in a deep burgundy structured blazer and tailored wide-leg trousers, her hand resting on her desk and her expression saying everything the caption didn't need to. Akane mid-meeting, animated, a whiteboard of numbers behind her that an editor had smartly left unblurred because the numbers told their own story. Akane on the phone, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling window, the Seoul skyline arranged behind her like it was also trying to get in the shot. The headline read, "The Woman Who Runs Seoul. How Akane Bridges Built an Empire, and Why She's Just Getting Started." By noon the day it ran, her name was the top trending business topic in South Korea. By the afternoon, 3 of the executives who had been quietly cited in Sungo's planted stories had called her office directly. 2 of them wanted to meet. 1 of them wanted to invest. She took all 3 meetings. The comment sections were something else entirely. "She is glowing. Seoul doesn't deserve her. Whoever is coming for her career clearly has no idea who they're dealing with. The way she keeps announcing deals every time someone tries to drag her. Ma'am is using press releases as clapbacks." Akane saw the comments because Eunice sent her a screenshot compilation every morning, labeled, "Today's Fan Mail." It had become a ritual, reading them over espresso, laughing at the ones that made her laugh, feeling genuinely moved by the ones that were more than jokes. There were women writing about watching her, women in Seoul, women in California, women she'd never meet, who said things like, "She's the reason I went back to work after I thought it was over, and I showed my daughter her profile 3 times this week." She kept those. Her parents flew in for a week in her 6th month. Her father walked into her office and stood at the window for a long time without saying anything. Then he turned and looked at her and said, "I have been to a lot of offices. I know. This is a real one, baby girl." She hugged him for longer than she usually did. Her mother, predictably, cried. Then she organized Akane's kitchen, refolded everything in the baby's closet by size and season, left 40 meals in the freezer labeled by day and mood: Tuesday, when you need comfort; Friday, when you feel like celebrating; and flew home saying she would be back the moment Akane went into labor. "Don't you dare have that baby without calling me first," her mother said at the airport. "Mama, you're in California. I will be on that plane so fast. Mama." Akane Michelle Bridges. She was still laughing when she got back to the car. Sungo called once. She let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was 3 minutes long and that she summarized to Bora in 2 sentences. "He's worried about optics. He wants to meet." Bora's response was 4 words. "Absolutely not. Not yet. There was a gala coming." The invitation had been circulating in Seoul's upper circles for weeks before the event. A private gala for a coalition of Asia-Pacific investors, hosted in the kind of venue that didn't appear on any public calendar and wasn't discussed in any publication that would put it in a headline. This was old money and new money in the same room, which was a combination Seoul managed with a particular cocktail of ambition and ceremony. Akane had been invited because she was, by this point, exactly the kind of person those rooms sought. Not as an ornament, as a fixture. She arrived at 8. The venue was a heritage building in the center of the city, stone-arched and softly lit, with flower arrangements that had clearly cost someone's quarterly bonus and a guest list that Akane had reviewed the night before and memorized, because she always did her homework. She was 8 months pregnant. She wore ivory, a gown, specifically constructed for her by a designer who had flown measurements back and forth 3 times to get it right, that moved like something poured. Clean lines, structured through the bodice, flowing from the waist with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need embellishment. A single gold cuff on one wrist. Her posture was immaculate. Her expression was the one she'd worn to every significant room in her career. Open, present, unbothered in the deepest possible sense. She walked in. The room did not stop. It didn't need to stop. What it did was more interesting. It reorganized. Conversations recalibrated. People mid-sentence finished their thoughts and then looked over. A small current moved through the room the way sound moves through water, not loudly, just everywhere. One of the models near the entrance, tall, professionally beautiful, dressed in something architectural and black, looked at Akane for a long moment and then looked at her companion and said something Akane didn't catch but didn't need to. Yuna, who had come as her +1 and who was technically always working even when she was technically not, appeared at her elbow. You have 8 minutes before the CEO of Minyoung Capital arrives, and he specifically asked to be introduced to you. I know, Akane said. Give me 6. I want to say hello to Mrs. O first. She moved through the room. She'd known Sungo was on the guest list. That was part of why she'd come. She saw him at 8:20, near the far end of the room, in conversation with 2 men she recognized from the investment world. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched him for a moment. The familiar posture, the easy smile, the hand gestures she'd once found charming, and felt something clarify in her chest. Not anger. Anger was a fire you spent. What she felt was colder and more useful than anger. She went to find the CEO of Minyoung Capital. The first moment came 40 minutes in, during the cocktail portion, when one of the evening's hosts, a jovial man named Director Chai who ran a foundation Akane had donated to twice, called her over to join a small group he was assembling for what he called an informal introduction circle. She joined. For people. She knew 2 of them. The other 2 were introduced. And then Sungo was there, also invited into the circle from the other side, by someone who didn't know. He saw her. His expression moved through several things in quick succession and then settled into something smooth and unreadable. Akane, he said. Sungo. Her voice was the same temperature it always was. Nice to see you. Director Chai, not reading the room with particular nuance, launched into an enthusiastic summary of Akane's recent work. He was generous about it, almost embarrassingly so, citing numbers, deals, the profile piece, all of it. He concluded with, really? She's been the story of the Seoul business community this year. One of the new people said, I read that profile. Extraordinary, really? They looked between Akane and Sungo with the vague social awareness that something was present in this circle that they couldn't quite name. Do you 2 work together? Silence. Half a beat of it. Akane smiled. It was the warmest smile in the room. We had a business relationship that concluded, she said pleasantly. And a personal one. She touched her stomach, briefly, and looked at Sungo with an expression of complete, unhurried calm. He's been very supportive, she continued, in a tone that could have meant anything and meant everything. Of my journey. Sungo's jaw moved. He actually inspired one of my best quarters, Akane continued, still warmly, turning slightly to include Director Chai in the conversation the way she always did. She never spoke past people. She always brought them with her. Sometimes the biggest motivation is proving something to yourself. You know how it is. She laughed. Genuine, musical, the real laugh that disarmed rooms. I really should send a thank you note. Someone laughed. Then someone else. Director Chai laughed the loudest. The way older men do when they're delighted and also grateful someone else is controlling the room. Sungo excused himself shortly after. He found her later, near the end of the evening, when the room had thinned out and the string quartet had transitioned to something softer. She was standing by one of the arched windows with a glass of water and Minyoung Capital's CEO. And the conversation had clearly been good because they were both laughing. The CEO excused himself, with a card pressed warmly into Akane's hand and a remark about following up next week. Sungo stepped into the space he'd left. You didn't have to do that, he said. Do what? She asked. His mouth flattened. In front of Chai and his group. I said you were supportive, Akane said. That was generous of me. Akane. Sungo. Her voice was steady. Not cold, just completely and unmovably steady. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to hear it. She looked at him directly, the way she looked at people when she wanted them to understand they were not being managed. I'm not angry. I want you to know that. I was, for about 48 hours, and then I decided to close that account and reinvest the energy somewhere useful. She tilted her head slightly. But I need you to understand that those stories you planted, every single one of them, I traced back. I documented everything. I don't need to use it, but I have it. He was quiet. The baby, he started, will be taken care of. By me and by people who love us both. Her expression remained open, not cruel. You can have a role in this child's life if you choose that. That conversation will happen with lawyers present and on a schedule that works for me. But it will not happen tonight. I made mistakes, he said. His voice had dropped. The performance had gone out of it. I know that. Yes, she said simply. I want to. Sungo. She said his name gently, the way you close a door that you're not slamming, just closing. Send the request through proper channels. I'll respond. She picked up her clutch. But tonight, I have 3 more people I want to speak to before they leave. And the CEO of Shinsung Partners specifically requested an introduction at 9:30. She smiled, not unkindly, just finished. Good night. She crossed the room. She didn't look back. The 3 conversations she had in the following 45 minutes were among the best of the evening. She was told this afterward by 2 separate guests. 3 months later, Akane Bridges gave birth to a daughter in a private clinic in Seoul, with her mother in the room and her father on video call and Yuna outside in the hallway managing a full inbox that had apparently decided a national holiday was a good time to send urgent messages. She named her daughter Callie. Not for California exactly, for everything California meant. For roots. For something that had already survived before it was born. The blog that had run 6 articles questioning her capability published a feature 18 months later. The headline was, The Unstoppable Rise of Akane Bridges, What Seoul Got Wrong and What She Got Right. She read it on a Tuesday morning. Callie was asleep in the carrier against her chest. Espresso in hand. Seoul out the window, bright and loud and endlessly alive. She thought about sending a response. Then she thought, no, let the receipts speak. She put the phone down and looked at her daughter's face for a while instead. Then she finished her espresso and opened her laptop and went back to running her empire. Callie was 14 months old the first time she pulled herself up on the edge of Akane's office couch, looked around the room with the particular gravity of a person who has just discovered standing, and then looked directly at her mother with an expression that said, Are you seeing this? Akane, who had been mid-sentence on a call with a logistics partner in Singapore, stopped talking. Hold on 1 second, she said into the phone. She looked at her daughter. Her daughter looked back at her with those wide, serious eyes that had been serious since the very first day, like Callie had arrived already thinking about something. You did it, Akane said. Callie made a sound that was not quite a word but was absolutely a response. Akane laughed, the real one, the full one, the one that had disarmed boardrooms and gala venues and now filled this office on the 29th floor of a building she owned 40% of. She laughed until her eyes watered, and Callie, delighted by the reaction, bounced on unsteady legs and made the sound again. Sorry, Akane said back into the phone. My daughter just stood up for the first time. The logistics partner, a man she'd negotiated with for 11 months across 4 time zones, paused and then said, warmly, Congratulations, we can finish this tomorrow. We can finish it now, Akane said. She's fine. I'm fine. She was already reaching for Callie with one arm, pulling her up onto her lap, settling her against her chest with the practiced ease of a woman who had learned to conduct business with a baby present because the business did not pause and neither did the baby. Where were we? The firm turned 4 years old in March. Akane did not throw a party. She was not a party for herself person, which was something her mother found baffling and her father found entirely predictable. What she did was take her core team, all 22 of them now, to dinner at a restaurant in Itaewon that required a 3-month reservation and where the chef came out personally because he'd been trying to get Akane to invest in his expansion for a year, and this felt like an opportunity. She told him she'd look at the proposal. He sent it the next morning. The numbers were good. She was going to say yes. She didn't tell him that yet. Her parents came in April. They came every 4 months now, a rhythm that had established itself organically after Callie was born, and that no one had formally agreed to but everyone honored. Her mother flew in with her carry-on packed with things Akane hadn't asked for and absolutely needed. Her father flew in with nothing except his reading glasses and the particular calm of a man who had spent 40 years being the most prepared person in any room and had recently decided to let someone else have that. He let Akane have it. They walked through the city one afternoon, just the two of them, while her mother stayed back at the apartment putting Callie down for a nap with the seriousness of a military operation. Akane and her father walked through Buckshin, past the Hanok rooftops and the tourists with their cameras and the old women selling things from low tables on the street. Her father walked with his hands in his coat pockets and didn't say much, which was his way of saying everything. "You like it here," he said eventually. "Not a question." "I love it here," Akane said. "You're going to stay." She thought about it. The thinking was a formality. She'd already known the answer. "For now." "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "Your mother wants you to come home." "My mother wants me in the next room." He laughed. "She wants Callie in the next room. You're incidental." Akane bumped her shoulder against his arm. He put his arm around her briefly, the way he'd done since she was small, and then they walked on. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I've told you before." "I know. I want to tell you differently this time." He paused. They stopped at a corner, waiting for the light. "I've watched a lot of people build things. I've built things myself. And the ones that last, the real ones, they don't get built by people who needed it to be easy. They get built by people who kept going when it wasn't." The light changed. They walked. "You kept going." Akane was quiet for a moment. The city moved around them. "I had good people," she said. "You chose good people," he corrected. "That's different. Anybody can be surrounded by good people. Not everybody knows how to choose them and keep them." She thought about Yuna, who had been promoted twice and still showed up early. She thought about Bora, who had gone to war for her reputation with the quiet precision of someone who took it personally. She thought about her team, about Mrs. O, about the logistics partner in Singapore who had gracefully postponed a call so her daughter could stand up for the first time. "Yeah," she said. "I guess I did." Sungo's company restructured twice in 14 months. She read about it the way she read most things. Once carefully without commentary. His lawyers had reached out 6 months after the gala, which had become the standard timeline for all communication between them. There was an arrangement now, clean and documented and presided over by 2 sets of attorneys who were earning what she was paying them. Sungo had a schedule with Callie. He showed up to it consistently, which she gave him credit for, silently, in the ledger she kept of things that mattered. He had not tried to speak to her beyond logistics in almost a year. She thought sometimes about the man she'd believed he was in those first months. The one who'd argued with her intelligently and sent the proposal at 6:47 in the morning and looked at her, according to her mother, like she was interesting. She thought about whether any of that had been real or whether it had all been construction. She decided, eventually, that the question didn't serve her. What he had been was complicated. What she had gained. Callie, the fire, the quarter that changed everything, the profile that made her name, was not. She released the question. She kept the lessons. She kept Callie. That was more than enough. The gala clip lived on the internet forever, the way things do. She hadn't known anyone was filming. Someone had been filming. A 10-second clip, no audio, just the visual. Akane in ivory, 8 months pregnant and incandescent, saying something to a man in a black suit with an expression of such complete and sovereign unbotheredness that you didn't need the audio to understand what was happening. Her posture alone told the whole story. The clip had been viewed 11 million times. It had been set to music. It had been turned into a graphic. Someone had stitched it with the caption, "This is what confidence actually looks like," and that version alone had 4 million views on its own. Akane had seen it once, laughed, and gone back to work. On a Thursday morning in late spring, she was in her office at 7 a.m. She was always in her office at 7 a.m. This had not changed. This would probably never change. When Callie, who had recently graduated to the portable playpen that lived in the corner beside the bookshelf, pulled herself up on the rail and took 3 unsteady, glorious, determined steps across the carpet toward her mother's desk. Akane stood up so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. She crossed the office in 2 strides and crouched down, and Callie walked directly into her arms with the expression of someone who had just done the most obvious thing in the world and couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. Akane held her daughter and pressed her face into her neck and breathed. Outside, Seoul was already going. Already loud and glittering and building itself into another day. Another deal. Another story happening somewhere on the 29th floor. or the fourth, or the street, or the room that hadn't opened its door yet. It will, Akane thought. It always does. She kissed Callie's head. She stood up. She straightened her blazer. She went back to work. Some cities try to break you. Seoul tried. Akane Bridges finished her espresso and built an empire anyway. And her daughter, serious-eyed, steady, already walking toward things, watched and learned.
So besties, in this story we learned that the people who try to use you, discredit you and break you are often the one who push you into the greatest version of yourself. You don't have to fight back loudly, you don't have to explain yourself, you just have to keep building. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't argue with people who can't afford it. She just makes sure her results do the talking. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.